Of course, it's not for everyone. I think this is a kind of sword that you probably either love or hate. We're back again at the depot of the SKKG Foundation. Well, you're back again. I've been here through all the day of measuring and filming all these videos. So for me, it's one go, but I'm not sure when this will be published. But if you haven't seen previous videos, or if this is the first one to come out, SKKG is a foundation based on a collection, a very large collection of all kinds of historical heritage and art by a Swiss collector. So you'll see behind me a few shelves here of the depot. And while it doesn't focus primarily on arms and armor, there's a large part of it is, well, maybe not a large part of it, but let's say they do have a lot of weapons and swords specifically. So I'm here in Zurich at the depot of the SKKG. And by the way, you should also check out their website because they have a really cool website and I'm sure you can find a whole bunch of stuff there as well. But today's sword is very special for me because while I'm not an expert in the spadone, well, actually I'm not at all an expert in the spadone, but I'm here with the top experts I can think of, so Julian and Niccolò from the Spadone project. And it just so happens that over the weekend we were at a medieval fair market where Niccolò held a Spadone workshop. So I had my first-hand experience with the technique of using the spadone, and a few days later I got to hold my first spadone. So this, if you want more details, check out the Spadone project or the episode I had where I talked to Niccolò about the project and the spadone in general. I think that is a very good introduction to the type of sword for who may not know much of it. What we have here is something from the mid-1500s in style, at least. It's, as far as I understand, hard to really determine the tail end of spadone production because, well, they're really cool, so they were produced long into the time in which they weren't used anymore. But as far as my understanding goes, this one should be legit. So 1550s, let's say, roundabout. The hilt style here is German kind, so it's the more elaborate, more like, has all these little decorations and stuff, which, well, they're not for a minimalist, let's put it. They're more flamboyant. And speaking of flamboyant, you'll notice that the blade here is a Flamberge. So it has this wavy shape to it, which makes it really cool, I think. Of course, it's not for everyone. I think this is a kind of sword that you probably either love or hate. But having had the chance to really practice spadone a little bit, I feel like loving this one today. So check out the grip here. It's massive, really big. So it's not only a two-handed sword, it could hold 4 hands if needed. There is a little bit of a doubt on the pommel cap here. We've noticed that it's a little shinier than the rest of the pommel. So what that means in terms of, well, authenticity of the whole piece, or in terms of, let's say, whether it's been at some point in time reassembled or taken apart and fixed, hard to say. It's really even hard to say whether it's a replacement cap here. It could be authentic and, well, I mean, nothing speaks to it being weird, let's say. Simply a different coloration, slightly different coloration of the button. In terms of the blade, you'll see it's quite massive. So if I hold it, let's say, on my foot here, so just a few centimeters from the ground, it's, well, reaching my nose, which, if I understand correctly, would be the correct, this would be a right size spadone for my height. So that feels quite nice. We were discussing the blade a little earlier and, well, different ways of making this Flamberge kind of blade shape. So you have versions where they're forged, kind of, we're talking about one, it's not in this collection, but it's forged into the wavy pattern. Whereas others like this one are ground into a wavy pattern. I'm not sure what that means in terms of quality of the blade. I can't imagine it makes a massive difference. Maybe in terms of qualitative, in terms of value and work put into the blade, I don't know. It is a fancy hilt, but it's quite simple. You'll also notice it doesn't have really fancy decoration. It just has a little bit of line work, a little X here. So I would say flashy, but not like for the really rich guy in a sense. Here it is pointed at you. So let me know if that feels menacing. It does have one mark. It's so while the hilt is German in style, the mark here is possibly the orb mark, possibly something else. It's a little worn out, but I'll show it in close up. And there seems to be a little letter next to it too, possibly an eye. I wonder if a Spanish blade would make sense on a German hilt. I don't know enough about spadoni to be able to go beyond just randomly speculating. So in any case, we'll dive into the close-ups for the sword because it's quite cool, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, but also make sure to check out the Spadone project and subscribe if you haven't. So I'll see you, we'll get into the details. Okay, so let's start with a panoramic of the sword from pommel to tip. As I mentioned already, this is a German style of spadone, so more northern German, if I understood Niccolò correctly. Of course, the Flamberge is not a northern German characteristic. I have to say, the kind of sword is really more comfortable than you would expect. It is, however, massive. So here you'll see my hand in comparison to the cross hilt, to the hilt here. And you'll see that the cross guard is huge, although you'll actually see it's also quite thin. So it's not like thick bars. It's more almost like sheet in a sense. It's not sheet, but you know what I mean. Here's the pommel. It's really nice. The grooves there are super deep, and I think that makes it stand out. It's really wonderful. In terms of balancing, I'm not a spadone practitioner, but here is what I was mentioning in terms of the peen button there being a bit of a different color. So as you zoom in especially, you'll see it's way brighter, but you'll also see that the pitting and kind of the damage to the metal or the aging is consistent with what you see on the rest of the pommel. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Again, here, I just really wanted to highlight how deep and how sharp these grooves are in the pommel. Lots of times pommels are kind of consumed, and speaking of worn, here is the leather that covers the grip almost in its entire length. So it has lost very little. I think on the other side there's a little bit of damage, but the leather is there almost complete, and the decorative fabric tacit as well. Of course, it's possible that these were substituted at some point later, but nothing screams forgery or fake or historicism on these. So it's really nice to see in detail how this fabric decoration was made and how the leather was wrapped. You'll maybe be noticing also that the grip is actually quite thin and very agile, let's say. It feels so in the hand as well. It's a very agile kind of sword to hold, despite its weight, which is, I think 3 kilos or something like that. Here we see again how massive the the hilt actually is. It's really huge, both in length and width, let's say. But the thickness of the crossbars there, of the cross hilt, as I mentioned, is actually quite thin. These rounded decorations, or these hook-like decorations, are typical of the German style of the spadone, and it also has some very simple geometric engravings in it. So when I mentioned before that it's not like a rich man's or an ostentatious kind of sword, that's what I mean, in the sense that, of course, it's not for a peasant, but it's not flamboyantly decorated. Here I want you to notice just how much the hilt here tapers into almost sheet. So it's really, really thin at the quillin tips. Another sign for me of this being a little bit of a utilitarian sword, perhaps in a sense, relatively of course, look how uneven those fullers are. They're really thin and they're not really centered perfectly. Here we see the mark. It's possibly an orb with a cross, and that is kind of a quite typical kind of maker's mark. It could be something else, however, I haven't looked into it much, so this is up to you guys if you're interested. Here we see again the ricasso area, and I want to point your attention again to the top fuller there. You'll see how it kind of just slips off of the blade, whereas the bottom fuller stays well within it. This kind of imperfection is interesting to me on a sword that, let's say, at first glance is so special. Let's say you would imagine it as a very high quality piece. As we move to the Flamberge blade here, you'll see that it's not extremely pronounced, like the undulation there is not extremely pronounced, or at least it's not the most pronounced I've seen. Still, very beautiful and very unique blade. I wonder if this one maybe, in terms of use, is a little more similar to a regular blade given the non-extreme undulation it has there. And as we move into the tip, you'll see it has a broad but very sharp kind of spear tip as we move into it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the spadone, and please like and subscribe and share if you like the videos, and see you soon in another sword video. Bye!